Hey everyone, welcome back to Friends You Can Grow With. I'm your host, Matt Nespri, and sitting down with me today is a new friend, Tina Baham. Tina, thank you very much for agreeing to come on the podcast. I'm very excited to have you here. Can you just introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, my name is Tina. I don't know. There's not a lot to tell. I'm a nurse.
Yeah.
I work in the Woodlands at a dialysis clinic. Been coming to the ARC since about 2015.
Okay.
Love it here. Found a home here. Two beautiful children. They're grown and they're big people. And I have one granddaughter. And I'm just, thank you for having me here.
Yeah, glad to have you on. And we specifically wanted to have you on because I have heard from many people just some details of your story and a thing that you have been through in life that there's no way around it. It's difficult, very hard. And so we wanted to have you on because we want you to share your story because we've heard that you've grown through it, that you've learned a lot through it. And we believe that others can benefit and grow through it as well. So thank you for agreeing to come on and share your story because I have no doubt that it is powerful and incredible. And I'm looking forward to hearing it. So without any further ado, why don't you give us your story? Start where you think is the best spot to start.
All right. Well, thank you, Matt, for having me. I really appreciate it. This is an honor. It really is to be here and to share what myself and my family have gone through and how the Lord has just been with us before even and every step of the way. A year and a half ago, January of 2023, my husband passed away. It was very unexpectedly. We were married for 27 and a half years. He was my best friend. He was the love of my life. Sorry.
No, that's totally fine.
Someone that I prayed for since I was a teenager, that God just answered every single thing, and had a wonderful marriage. I can probably count on one hand how many times we fought. We discovered very early on in our marriage that most fights started because one of us was being selfish. And so we really tried to root that out of our marriage, that selfishness. He served the Lord. He loved God. He was a worshiper, and just a great, great husband and a wonderful father. And he loved to fish. That was his big passion, other than his two children. And he started fishing in Galveston after our youngest, Kaylee, graduated from high school. Before that, he stayed close to home on Lake Conroe and did some bass fishing and stuff like that. But he started doing some seaside fishing and surf fishing and take his kayak out. And he was an avid kayaker. He was extremely healthy. He was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And in January, around the beginning of January, he went out and had a great fishing trip. He came home, and then January the 18th, he's like, I think I'm going to go out again. And I was like, well, when are you going to go? He's like, well, not tomorrow, but in 2 days on Friday. And I was like, okay. And so I just didn't think much of it. Thursday came around and he started getting his truck together, getting the kayak on the truck, loading all his fishing gear up and stuff. And Thursday evening, we're, sitting on the couch, and I was like, Barry, I don't think you should go tomorrow. He's like, well, why? I said, well, the weather's getting bad. And this was a few weeks, we had beautiful weather. It was like in the 60s and 70s, and it was just gorgeous. Yeah. And he's like, no, it's not going to be bad. I'm like, no, I think it's going to be cold tomorrow. It's going to be like down in the low 50s. I think it's getting cold and there's a storm coming. And he's like, oh, no, not in Galveston. I'm like, oh, I'm pretty sure it's going to be worse in Galveston. He's like, oh, I'll layer up. And because he was just ready to go. I mean, that's just the way he was. And we were sitting on the couch. And usually when he goes to Galveston, like, I never know where he's going. Like, he just tell me, I'm going over to Bolivar Peninsula, or I'm going somewhere, and like in the general area, but I never know exactly where he's going. And I looked over, and he was on his phone and on his maps, and I looked over, I said, well, what's that? He's like, well, that's where I'm going. And I was like, okay. And it looked just like a bunch of marsh around, like a big open water and marsh. I was like, well, where are you going to, put in at? He's like, well, over here. And I was like, okay. I said, well, how far is it from here to there where you're going? And he said about 3 miles. And I was like, Barry. He's like, I'm taking my trolling motor, Tina. He said, I'm going to be okay. And I'm like, all right. It's like, I still don't think you should go. And he's like, no, I'm going to be okay. I was like, okay. So we went to bed, and I woke up about 2:45 that morning, and I didn't notice that he was already out of bed. And anyway, he was on his way out, and I said, "Hey," and he said, "Oh, hey," laid back down in bed, kissed me. I was like, "You be safe." He's like, "I will," and he just kind of whoop and got out. And so I laid there for a couple of hours, couldn't sleep, and I got up and I went to work early, about 6:30, and I was busy all day long. I mean, all day long. It was one thing after another. And finally, about 3:30, I told the team, I was like, "Listen, guys, it's 3:30. I said, I'm exhausted. I've not had a break all day. I've been here since 6:30. I'm going to go home and finish up." They said, "Yeah, go home." And I go and I sit in my car and I realize, oh my goodness, Barry. And it just hit me. I'm like, he usually, when he's gone, he'll text me, he'll give me updates. "Hey, I'm here." He'll send me pictures of what he's done. And usually a lot of communication. I'm like, oh my goodness, my heart just sank in my car. And I immediately pulled up my phone and I tried to call him, and it went straight to voicemail. And I was like, oh my goodness. I pulled up the maps, like find my friends, see where he was. And it just kept on circling in the water, his location at 6:14 that morning. And I was like, okay, Tina, don't overreact. You always overreact. My family always make fun of me for overreacting. Okay, he's probably at home already. Because he said he was going to come back early. Maybe he dropped his phone in the water and it died. And I was just going through these things. And I tried calling him multiple times and it kept on going to voicemail. I was texting him, and things like that. And I was like, okay, let me just go home. On the way home, I called our son, Richard. He and his wife are missionaries at San Angelo State University. And so it's about 6 hours away. And so I called him and so I told him everything. He's like, "Yeah, Mom, you're right. Dad's probably just at home already." He said, "Just call me when you get home. Let me know." I'm like, "I certainly will." So I got home and his truck wasn't there. I'm like, okay. And so I called Richard back and I was like, "I'm trying not to panic." I was like, "I'm trying to remain calm." And he's like, "It's okay, Mom." He said, "Let's just give him a little bit more time." He said, "Or you can go ahead and call the police if you want to down there and they can go search." I was like, "I don't even know where to tell them to search. Like, I don't even know." And so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to remain calm. So I got home about 4. I was like, I'm going to give it till 5. So 5 o'clock came. And then my daughter, she finally got home. She lives in Chicago. So we called her a 3-way call and telling her everything. And she's like, "Okay, Mom." We tried everything. We looked up, like, maybe where did he last do his debit card purchase? We looked in the bank records and stuff like that, and called the bank, and because there was 2 Buc-ee's purchases. I was like, well, maybe he purchased something on the way there and then on the way back, but they couldn't give me a timestamp. And I'm like, okay. And so I told Richard, I said, well, at 6 o'clock, I'm leaving. I'm going to head down there. I'm going to give him till 6. And I wrote notes and signs just in case his phone did die and I missed him. And so I wrote signs and put signs up all over the house to where he couldn't miss it. And I headed out, and Richard goes, "Well, Mom," he said, "stop by Cypress." Or, he said, "I'm going to meet you on 45. I'm in Cypress." I'm like, "What do you mean you're in Cypress?" He said, "Well," he said, "actually," he said, "we came to Lindsay's parents' house because her dad was having a health issue." I'm like, I said, "You're here?" He says, "Yeah." And I'm like, oh my goodness. He said, "Mom, you're not going to Galveston alone." And the fact that he was there and I didn't have to go alone, I was like, God put him in that place because he knew I was going to need him. And so we stopped by 45 somewhere along the way towards Cypress, and I picked him up. We headed to Galveston, and, and on the way there to pick up Richard, in that moment, God told me, he said, "He's with me." And I was like, and I saw a picture of my husband standing right there with Jesus. And it looked like him, but it didn't look like him at the same time. And then I already knew in my heart right then that he was gone. I knew before I even got there. And so I don't know, picked Richard up, and he was talking, kind of making some jokes and stuff like that and talking. And I was being positive in my speech, but questioning then, okay, God, was that really you? Was that really what you showed me? Was that really the truth? And so based on the picture of, because Richard's like, "Well, Mom, where are we going to go?" I was like, "Well, I remember looking at your dad's phone." And I said, and based on that, this is where he is. I said, so he had to have put his truck somewhere on this road, and that's kind of where we went. And so I told him, I said, if his truck is there, we got closer. I said, if his truck is there, I said, I want you to call 911 immediately. And it was about 9:15 when we got there, and we got there at the end of that road, and sure enough, his truck was there. And I just told Richard, I called 911, and I jumped out of the car. I ran down to the shore, and just up and down, I was just yelling his name. Richard brought a flashlight with him, and we were shining the light, and I just kept on calling his name over and over and over, thinking that he was right there, because that's where his location too was showing. It was circling, right there. And I was like, well, maybe he's just stuck, or, and it took about 30 minutes for the cops to come, and we told them our story, and they immediately got the Coast Guard involved. And everything happened pretty fast after that. Pretty fast. Within an hour, they had choppers up. They had drones in the air. So, and then the storm started coming. So then it was about 10 or 10:30, and it started raining, and we just sat in the car just waiting for an update, and they said, we're going to search. And I was like, okay, we didn't tell, the only people that knew was Richard, myself, and our daughter, and that was it. We didn't call anybody else. Because it was now 10 o'clock at night. I didn't want to worry anybody, because, what if we do find him? What if he does come home? And it just, the hour just kept on going and going and going. And it was about 2:30 in the morning, and Richard finally fell asleep. And the storm just really started coming in, and it was just raining. And we had already prayed, Richard and I had several times. But as he was asleep, and I just looked out the window, and I was like, you know what, God? I said, no matter what this outcome is, I said, this does not change who you are. I said, and this does not change who you are to me. I said, you are still good. I said, it does not change your character. It doesn't change, anything about you. And so, God, I just put my trust in you that that whatever this is, whatever this outcome is, that I'm still going to follow you. I'm still going to live for you. And anyway, so we waited till the morning. About 5 o'clock in the morning, the Coast Guard called us, and then everything started going through my son. I just let him handle it. And he wanted to know if it's okay to put it on social media and put the news out. And I said, yes, absolutely. Just put it out there. I don't care. I want anybody that might have seen him just to put it out there. And it happened pretty fast. And then there was hundreds and hundreds of people looking for him. When appropriate time came, about 7, 8 o'clock, we started calling family members. And we had about, 30 plus family members come down, going door to door, just saying if anybody had a Ring camera and saw him. And then about 2 o'clock that afternoon, 2:30, the Coast Guard found his kayak. And that was a devastating time. And I didn't handle that well. I'll tell you that right now. Yeah. I did not handle that well. I think because maybe I'd been up since 2:30 that morning, maybe the previous morning, Friday morning. And now it was Saturday afternoon, and I hadn't eaten, I hadn't slept. My body just kind of went in shock. And so there was a little, medical issue there. But I came around, and then Kaylee we're trying to get her flying in from Chicago. And anyway, she finally came in town about 7 o'clock at night, and the Coast Guard was meeting with us and giving us a debriefing about 7 o'clock that night. And so all three of us sat down with the Coast Guard and with the police, and they basically said that their part was over because they don't do recovery. They just do rescue. And the fact that it had been now 24 hours and the weather conditions, and they found his kayak, that they didn't expect to find him alive, which I kind of already knew. And so they were off the case at that point, the Coast Guard was. But Galveston police said, Tina, they said, we're not going to stop looking for him. We're going to still look for him. We've got other counties coming in to us to aid us. We've got the fire department. There was the equestrian search and rescue. They were there. There was, 15, 20 agencies involved looking for him. When I say hundreds of people, there were literally hundreds of people looking for him. At one point in time, the Jamaica Beach fire department came over. One of the ladies came over and knocked on our door. It was sometime Saturday before the kayak was found, and asked us if we had anything to eat. And Richard's like, no, we haven't eaten. And she said, well, y'all have been here longer than I have, and I haven't eaten. So she went and got us some food and brought it to the car. Wow. And we told her thank you. And she said, I want you to know, she says, you have no idea how many people are looking for your dad. And I said, thank you. And through that time, I had family members just kept on saying, Tina, you have to have faith. Tina, you have to have faith. And I would just nod my head and say yes, because I just kept on going back to what God had already shown me on the way there to Galveston.
Mm-hmm.
And I already knew in my heart that he was gone. I already knew. And so it wasn't a lack of faith when you already know something.
Yeah.
And so the Jacob's Tree is a foundation in Galveston that helps aid families of when loved ones go missing.
Mm-hmm.
And so they put us up in a condo that night. And then one of the police officers came and met us Sunday morning and took us out, because now they were putting extra drones out. Several different counties were coming from all different directions to verge on kind of where they thought that he might be. His kayak was found about 4 miles from where he went into the water, so 4 miles down. And so they were kind of going off of that, going off the currents and the weather conditions and things of that nature. And so we were getting ready to go out with them on the boat to look for them. And anyway, as they were trying to get their drones, and these drones are big. I'm not talking about a little bitty drone. These are like 6-8 feet drones. They're huge drones that go up. They brought them in on trailers. As they were getting those ready to go up, they got a call that they had found him. And that was my other prayer to God. I said, God, if he's out there, I said, please find him. I don't want him in the water. I don't want him cold. I don't want him in the water. I want him to be found. And they got a call that they found him. And he was 6 miles past his kayak. Wow. So he was 10 miles down from where he went in. And they kept on asking me, everybody kept on asking me, well, was he wearing a life jacket? I'm like, I think so. I don't know. I wasn't with him. They asked me all these things, and I was like, I don't know, for sure. But I do know that if it got rough, he would tell me he would put one on. And they came to me and they told me, they said, he did everything right. He had the exact same life jacket that we wear. He said it was all functional. They said it was probably just an accident. And so as we went home, and you can imagine the devastation that, myself and my son and daughter and our families were feeling. But on the way home, it was about 12 o'clock, and I just felt this warmth over my heart. And my daughter was driving my car, and I looked out the window. I was like, God, I said, I know you're with me. I know you're here. I know I'm not alone. I said, I just don't know how I'm going to do this. And as we got home and trying to make preparations, it was just one thing after another. I don't know if you can imagine, just trying to see what we're going to do now.
Yeah.
And Kaylee was home. She would actually gotten into, she's a flight attendant. And she actually got hired by United. And they had, her training was supposed to start on January the 30th. And their headquarters is right here in Houston. And for 2 years, she tried to get on with United. And for some reason, she could never, her application would never go through. And I would say, Kaylee, I said, what do you think is going on with your application? She goes, it just must not be God's time for me, Mom. She goes, that's all I can say. And she applied again in late December. And the process was so fast, her processing, that they hired her on, and she was supposed to start training January the 30th. And the funeral was January the 30th.
Wow.
And she called them, and they told her, don't worry about coming in on time, just get here sometime that evening. And she was able to be here in town for 6 weeks after Barry had passed away. Wow. And been local. And I went and saw her once or twice a week. She came home once or twice a week. But the fact of the matter that she was so close and so home right after Barry had passed away was a big blessing. I told her, I said, Kaylee, I said, you know what? I said, God told you no for 2 years. I said, he knew. I said, God told you no for 2 years. I said, and he waited till the right time to say yes. I said, because he knew you needed to be here. He knew I needed you here. And she goes, you know what? You're right, Mom. And Richard, because they're missionaries, they were able to stay with me for a couple of weeks. But through all that, though, Matt, God was so close to me. And a couple of days after Barry had passed away, I was laying in bed, and I was just laying there, and I all of a sudden I don't know if I felt guilty. I don't know if I felt embarrassed. I'm not for sure, but I told God, I just started apologizing to God. I said, God, because I was so broken. It was like a piece of glass that just shatters. I said, it wasn't just like broken little pieces, big pieces that you can put together. I was like, God, my heart is completely shattered.
Yeah.
And I said, I am so sorry. I said, I have nothing to hold you. I have nothing to hold your presence. I have nothing to hold your spirit. I said, I am just so broken. I said, I don't know what to do other than give this to you. I said, there's no way. I said, I don't want to be hurting. I don't want to be broken for the rest of my life. I said, I don't know how you can do this. I don't know how you're going to fix my heart. I don't know how you're going to fix my life. I said, but God, I don't want to be broken for the rest of my life. I said, because I know that as I'm broken, I cannot do anything for you this way.
Yeah.
I said, I'm useless to you. I said, I'm completely useless. I said, God, please forgive me for being so useless right now. And I felt so bad because I had family members coming in and they were like, Tina, I had faith. I believed, and I didn't know what to tell them. Honestly, I had no idea what to tell my family members. Some strong family members are strong in the faith that were now struggling in their faith.
Yeah.
Because they're like, Tina, I really believe that Barry was going to be found. And I just looked at him and I was just like, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
I already knew he was gone.
Yeah.
So I wasn't struggling with that aspect of feeling like God had let me down in that area.
Yeah.
Because I already know,
Yeah. But that knowing, you saying that God gave you that picture, how did that help you in the process before it was final, before the kayak was found, before they recovered the body? How did that help you as your son and daughter are there and they're praying and inside you're thinking, but really, I think God told me something different. Right. How did you balance that?
I honestly, balancing that, I didn't really talk to anybody.
Yeah.
I was at the place to where I just really couldn't say a lot to people because that was the struggle of what I knew on the inside versus what everyone else is telling me to believe.
Yeah.
And I just kind of held it because I'm like, well, maybe they are right. Maybe there is hope. Maybe, maybe I was wrong. Maybe I misheard God. Maybe I'm incorrect. And so I didn't really say a lot to them. Yeah. I didn't say anything to Richard and Kaylee. I just kind of kept that to myself. Yeah. And it was just, I don't know, because I was still really devastated when they told me all those things.
Right.
But I think God was kind of softening and comforting my heart and kind of easing me into that. So it wouldn't be as much of a shock as it was. But yeah. Yeah.
As you were going through it, prior to everything, the kayak getting found and his body getting found, what were people doing that was the most helpful?
The most helpful, they were going door to door. I had, my brother and my cousin's husband, they were going to door knocking. Some of them were just there and leaving me alone. Yeah. That was helpful, honestly.
Just being around
Just being there, yeah. Right. They would get in the backseat of the car and just kind of be there. Yeah. Ask me if I need anything. I said no, because the weather was still bad. The whole weekend, the weather was just horrible. Yeah. It was raining and it was cold and it was very windy. And they asked me if I wanted anything to eat. They were kept, offering me things and just being there. Yeah. I think.
Because oftentimes when we find ourselves on the other end of that, we want to help, but we don't really know how.
Right.
So I'm wondering, what were those little things that people maybe did do that meant something to you? You said just them being around you was a big deal.
I think just showing up. I was really surprised at how many people showed up in Galveston. Yeah. I really was. And I think just them being there, I'm like, oh, and driving all that way, because they live in Kingwood, they live in Huntsville. I mean, a lot of them drove quite a ways to be there, and they were there and standing outside in the weather and, for all day. So that's Saturday. Yeah. And they ended up going home. Most of them went home Saturday night. And my mom stayed with me. My sister stayed. And then, my kids were with me. Yeah. Saturday night and Sunday morning.
Yeah. Wow. So in the time after that, when you've gotten the news and you're starting to have to take those next steps, what was that like?
Yeah, I was determined, honestly, I was determined to not go into depression.
Yeah.
I was determined that I'm still going to serve God. So every single morning, even the morning after I got up, I made my bed. I went and had my coffee and I prayed and I read the word. And the grieving, I never grieved just to grieve. I will say that. I grieved and I called out to God. I poured out my heart to him. And it was never just, oh, I'm over here sitting in a corner or laying in my bed, because I knew that wasn't going to be the answer, just laying in my bed.
Yeah.
I didn't just lay in my bed and just cry. If I was crying, God, my heart, I don't know what to do with this. God, I need you to help me. God, I'm sad. God, I need you to fix this. God, I don't know what to do. I don't know, what tomorrow looks like, and dealing with all the things that you deal with when a spouse dies, because it's not like another death. I've talked to people that have lost spouses, that have also lost children, or that have also lost a sister, that have also lost a parent. And they have all said that it's not like losing a spouse. Because when you marry someone, you enter a covenant with them, and you become one. And when they're all of a sudden gone, it's like this ripping that happens. And it's like this tearing that happens. And it's very hard to explain unless you go through it.
It's like losing a piece of yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And I would just pray, God, just tuck all those raw edges under, God, of my heart until they heal. And just tuck them under and just kind of press it out,
Yeah.
So it's not so jagged anymore. And every day I would just get up and I would just journal. I would pray and I would read. And the only thing at that time that I could read was the Psalms. I read my Bible every day before that, but at that moment, it was like, that's the only thing that I could tolerate, if that makes any sense. Yeah. So I would just read and I would write down the scriptures that meant anything to me at that moment. And then I prayed opposite of what I was feeling.
Yeah.
If I was sad, I was like, God, I'm really sad right now, but God, I know that you're going to restore my heart and you're going to turn I don't know how, this morning into joy. God, I'm broken, but God, I know that you're my healer. God, I'm lonely, but I know that you'll never leave me nor forsake me. And so I'd remind myself of who I was in God. And I was like, God, this does not feel good right now. I said, but God, I know that you're good to me and you're not going to stop being good to me. And I said, I don't know what my future looks like. I don't know what tomorrow looks like. I don't know what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. But God, I know in you it's still going to be good.
Yeah.
And that's what I honestly, Matt, every single day, that's what I did. I got up. Every single morning I did that. I did not fail. Every single morning, that's how I did. Wow. And that's the only way that I was able to get through. And it took a long time. I will say that. Because one of the biggest things that I dealt with was a lot of disappointment. I struggled probably with disappointment and the grief more than anything else. And it wasn't disappointment in my husband. It wasn't disappointment in God. For sure, it wasn't in the Lord. It was just disappointment in where I was in my life. Because at 49, I was not expecting to be a widow.
Yeah.
At 49 years old, I was not. And so I just kept on every day, God, I'm disappointed, but God, I'm fulfilled in you. You're my fulfillment. And I would just have to remind myself, and God, I give this to you. Please forgive me and repent. And I just kept on because I knew that if I stayed hurt, if I stayed broken, if I stayed unhealed, that it was going to be an area where the enemy was going to come in. And I did not want bitterness to start, developing. Yeah. I didn't want to be angry. I didn't want to be bitter. I didn't want any of those things. Yeah. And people kept on coming to me. It's like, it's okay to be angry at God. I'm like, I'm not angry at the Lord. Well, you're going to go through those, those phases of grief. And I was like, I'm not going to go through the anger. And they said, well, yes, you are, because it's a phase of grief. And I'm like, well, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. Yeah. I said, because I was like, for me, it was very important to grieve with respect to God, because God didn't do this to me. Yeah. Because I had some people tell me that, God did this because he's going to use you. And I'm like, well, number one, God is good. Yeah. And he did not do this to me. Yeah. We live in a fallen world and this was an accident. Accidents happen. I said, but I said, if I choose to allow God, he will use me in this.
Yeah.
I said, because he's not, he's a God of resource, and he's not going to waste anything.
Yeah.
I said, but God did not do this to me.
Wow. Did you grow up in church?
I did.
Okay.
Yes.
Because I'm seeing and listening to your reaction, and I don't know that that would be the typical reaction of many people.
Yeah.
So what, I guess, practices and habits did you have in place before this happened that helped you get through it? Because it sounds like the journaling, the Bible reading, your morning time, it sounds like you had such a strong habit and relationship before. Yes. What parts of that did you rely heavily on to get you through this?
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. I think because people were like, Tina, your faith is so strong. I'm like, well, faith is not built in the hard times, right? Your faith is in the Lord. Your trust in him is built in the good times, and it's tested, right, in those difficult times. And I said, it's because when times were great, I said, I sought after God. And I said, and I made a decision a long time ago, way before I married Barry, that when I gave my heart to the Lord, I gave my heart to the Lord. I said, God, I said, I'm yours. I said, and I'm going to follow you no matter what. And I made that decision a long time ago that no matter what happened in my life, that I'm going to follow him. Because even though I was raised in church, my teenage years, my early 20s, went through some very hard times in my family. Very difficult things but I just like, God, you know what? That might be my family, and that might be what's happening to me. Yeah. But I know that that's not you. I know that's not you doing this to me, and I'm still gonna follow after you, God. Yeah. And I think it's because of a decision that I made a long time ago. When you make the decision before the tough time comes, when the tough time comes, you just follow through. Yeah. You don't have to make that decision because you've already made it. Yeah. Wow. So on the other side of that, people who were coming to you and saying, my faith is shaken because of this, or I'm having a struggle. What did it feel like to be you, the widow who just lost their spouse, having to be the strong, faith-filled one and kind of bolster other people? It wasn't necessarily my children but it was some other family members, and I just didn't know what to say to them. I just kept on, and people would ask me, well, how are you doing? And I said, it's hard to explain. I said, I'm completely broken, but yet completely thankful at the same time. And they looked at me. I was like, God has been so good to me. And I said, God has just been so good to me. And I would tell them, the ways that God has been good. And so I just kept on asking God. It's like, God, how do I answer those family members? Like you're talking about whose faith was shaken. It's like, I don't know what to say to them. And it took maybe a year. It was around Christmas time that I was sitting there and I started venturing out of Psalms finally, right? My heart started healing and I can absorb more of the word. Yeah. And I was reading in James chapter 2, I want to say it's around 21, 22, 23. And it says, and Abraham believed God and it was accounted to him for righteousness. And I just stopped for a minute and I was like, he believed God and it was counted to him for righteousness' sake. And I was like, and God just spoke to my heart so quickly. And he said, Tina, he said, when you believe me for something, it's not about the outcome. He said, it's not about the end result and what you get. Do you get what you want or do you not get what you want? He said, it's all about, do you just believe me? Do you just believe in me? Is your faith in me that I am for you, that I'm good, and I'm good to you, and that I want the best for you? Yeah. And he said, it's just about having faith. It's not about the outcome. Yeah. Because if all you're looking for is the outcome, if that's all you're looking for, then your faith is going to waver. Yeah. Because God's plans are not always our plans. And what he wants is not always what we want. And we do live in a fallen world where mistakes happen, where accidents happen, where people get sick, cancer happens, car wrecks happen, things happen. And you're like, but where was God? And if you look for him, I promise you'll find him at. Yeah. It reminds me of the story in Daniel where the three friends are in the fiery furnace and they say, we won't bow down. Our God can save us, but even if he doesn't, I'm still not going to bow down. Exactly. Wow. That's exactly where I was. I was like, God, even if this outcome it, isn't what we want, I'm still going to serve you,
Yeah.
because I know that you're good and I know you're good to me.
And that all went back to a decision you made
Years
ago.
Years ago.
Wow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Man, that is such a mature faith decision to say that I'm going to believe in you and trust you regardless of how things turn out.
Yeah. I don't know if it's necessarily not a mature thing or if it's more of a childlike faith, that we're all called to, that we're just supposed to believe, as you're a child and if you're jumping and your dad's there going to catch you, I'm talking about, you just trust that they're going to catch you, and you're going to be safe. And for me, it's always just been an easy decision.
Yeah.
Because it's God.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? And I'm just a person. I'm just a man. I'm just his creation. But he is the creator.
Yeah.
He's the beginning and the end, and he's almighty.
Yeah.
And we're here for two things. God made us for two things. We are here to bring glory to him, and we're here to bring others into the knowledge of Christ. Everything else that we're called to, the individual callings that he has for us, will fall into those two buckets.
Yeah.
And so if I'm here to bring glory to God, then I'm fulfilling my purpose. If I'm here bringing others into knowledge of Christ, I'm fulfilling my purpose.
Yeah.
And everything else falls into that.
Yeah. And even through tragedy, finding a way to use that towards the purpose that God has for your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't think that was going to happen, honestly.
It's not something people ask for, I imagine.
No, I didn't even think, I don't know. I was just, trying to heal my heart, and just reaching out for God for healing every single day.
The healing process after that, what was that like for you? You said you spent a lot of time in the Psalms. You spent a lot of time journaling,
Yes,
praying.
yes.
What did you feel like God was really speaking to you and showing you through that time?
Telling me that he still has a purpose for my life. And he told me, he said, Tina, your latter days are going to be better than your former days. And I'm like, well, God, I don't see how that, I said, I believe you. I trust you. I said, I don't see it, because I couldn't see past that day that I was in, you know? And still, I don't know what that means. But I do know that God is good.
Yeah.
And he loves showing his goodness to his people.
Yeah. On the year after, what were the hardest kind of milestones to hit?
Yeah.
And how did you get through those?
Yeah. First anniversary, that was rough.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, that was rough. I went to his graveside and sat there and read his love. He wrote letters, because we did some long distance dating when we first met. Read his stories to me, and read our wedding vows, and wrote a letter to the Lord first, and just telling him how thankful I was for having such a wonderful marriage, for having 27 wonderful years. It's like, God, some people don't get that, and I'm so thankful that I had 27 wonderful years with him. And thankful for the father that he was to our children, and just the blessings that God gave us. And so I wrote a letter to the Lord, just thanking him. Wrote a letter to Barry, telling him goodbye, because I've not done that yet. Sorry.
No, you're fine, because I'm crying too now.
Anyway, but yeah, I just wrote letters, and then I went home. So yeah, that was a rough day.
Yeah.
His birthday when he turned 50 was rough. So he turned 50 July the 28th. And so we're 6 months apart. And so I was like, well, Barry, I said, I guess you're finally younger than me now. And and just again, celebrating him, celebrating his life, but more so celebrating God. It's really easy to idolize someone after they die. And that was really, it's been important to me along this grief journey to not idolize my husband, even though he's a great man. He really was an amazing man. And he had over 300 people at his service. 11 people through the service ended up giving their lives to Christ.
Wow.
And because of the testimonies and just his life. I mean, people, just how he impacted their lives on a day-to-day basis. But really, even though he was a great man, trying not to idolize him.
Yeah.
And just trying to give glory to God more so than honor to my husband. And that was really important to me.
Yeah.
And grieving with respect to the Lord.
Yeah. And in a way, in doing that, you honor Barry as well,
Yeah.
because his story is still
Yeah.
helping people, is still leading people through hard times, as you are leading people through hard times. What is some advice that you wish someone would have given you when you were going through that hard time? Maybe a word of encouragement or some practical tips?
Yeah. I wish someone would have told me how hard all the firsts were. You know, the first time you go to the grocery store, you know, it broke down in the cookie aisle. You know, it just broke down in the cookie aisle because I just go into the grocery store for the first time by myself. Yeah. And realized that, oh my gosh, I can't ever buy him his favorite cookies anymore. You know, he loved cookies, the golden Oreo ones. So, but yeah, just the first time that you just make your side of the bed. Yeah. You know, that was hard. But yeah.
Does it get easier the further
it
you're
does.
removed
Absolutely. 100% it gets easier. Yeah. And it gets easier if I would say, I'll say this, it gets easier if you want it to get easier. Yeah. You know, I've known people that have lost loved ones and they're still stuck years later in that same place. And that's not, I refuse to be there. Yeah. You know, you're talking about earlier hard times. Christmas came around, that was hard. Yeah. You know, and I was not really looking forward to that at all. But the day before Christmas, God just put an expectation in my heart. I don't know what it was, but he just put a little expectation. And I just started having this hope again that I hadn't had. And the day after Christmas, I was walking in the store and I said, you know what, God? I said, I refuse to be a grieving widow the rest of my life. I said, I refuse to be a grieving widow the rest of my life. And so I think a lot of it is deciding that you're not going to be broken for the rest of your life. Yeah. Allowing God to heal you, allowing him to restore you. Just because it's very important to me to be available to the Lord. Yeah. You know, I still want to continue doing and fulfilling his purpose in my life. You know, so that I think is a lot is being okay. It's okay to heal. You know, it's okay to grieve and it's okay to heal. And it's okay to, I won't say move on, but it's okay to let go. It's okay to smile. You know, it's okay to be happy. Yeah. So
it's okay to be a widow.
It's okay to be a widow.
But not make that your identity.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And so before I was a widow, I was married. Before I was married, you know, I was someone's child. I was still someone's child. But before that, I determined that I was going to be a child of God. Yeah. And that's who my identity has been in. And I just was not going to be a grieving widow for the rest of my life.
Being on the other side of it now, do you ever feel like people kind of view you as a grieving widow now, and almost like that, you know, oh, I'm sorry you lost someone, they're a little apprehensive? Or have you done a lot to like negate that and make it clear that this is something I went through, but it's not going to define me? Yeah,
I don't know if it's something that necessarily is being said, you know, spoken as something that's being lived. Yeah. You know, they see me, you know, my family members and my close friends, they see me and they see the difference in me. Yeah. You know, and I think that my life and what I'm doing and how I'm living and taking care of myself, you know, taking care of my home, you know, just doing the daily things, going to work, you know, and coming home, you know, doing those day-to-day things. And they see that I'm not, that I never did spend a day in bed, not one time. You know, did I just lay in bed and say, I deserve this, you know, I deserve to sit here and grieve. So I think that's a lot of it, is not necessarily those words that I'm saying to them that I'm better, but that they see me. And I think a lot of it is, you can tell a lot when you look at a person and you and if grief is on you or not, right? Yeah. And so yeah.
We talk in faith a lot about having strong faith or being stronger going through things. I don't know what merit that has, but I like to think of it as working out different muscles gives you different strength. What kind of different strength do you have now on the other side of this that you didn't have before?
Yeah. Honestly, I have always been close with the Lord, but it's been so different since Barry's passed away. It's like I can feel his arms around me. There's a different connection with him, with God. I don't know. It's like his voice is so clear.
Yeah.
Like I don't doubt it at all. You know, there's no doubt when the Lord speaks to me, I'm like, okay, I do it. And he gives, I don't know, he forewarns me when things are going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, I was like, man, you know, God has been so good to me. I mean, I look back, it's like, God, you took care of me. You made decisions for me before Barry had passed away. So before Barry had passed away, a year before, he doubled his life insurance. Barry did. He didn't tell me. I had no idea, because when he passed away, I was thinking, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to sell my house.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to sell my cars. What am I going to do? I do have a good job, but I can't live in this house all by myself.
Yeah.
You know, I can't afford all these things all by myself. And so I was, you know, the financial aspect of being alone was also there. And there was just a lot. And the fact that I know that the Lord put it on his heart to do that a year before he had passed away.
Wow.
And so I was thanking the Lord for that. We had some palm trees back in, was it 21? When did we have that big ice storm? That big
20.
freeze? 20?
Yeah.
We had palm trees around our pool.
Okay.
4 big palm trees. And the freeze came, and then after things started thawing, these things just started dying. And I was like, Barry, for I guess 3 years, or 2 years, I was like, Barry, I said, why did our palm trees die? I said, there are people around this neighborhood, their palm trees are still looking good. And he'd be like, I don't know. But he would scurry up there, those palm trees, and he would trim them every year. And I was like, I just don't understand why our palm trees died and everyone else's, you know, didn't. I said, what did we do wrong, or what did they do right? I don't know. And he's like, he didn't even bother him. And he's like, oh, well, I don't know. And so in late January, I was out in the yard doing some yard work and trimming some crepe myrtle trees, because he trimmed them every year.
Yeah.
He trimmed 2. There were 2 left. I'm like, I can't have 2 crepe myrtles untrimmed and 2 trimmed. I said, so I've got to figure out how to do this.
Yeah.
It was like January I don't know, it was later in January. And I was like, it might have been early February, actually. It might have been longer than that, because his service was January the 30th. So it must have been in February. And so I'm getting all the tools out, right? Because some of these branches are big.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know, trying and getting all the tools. I got the clippers. I got the chain. I found a small chainsaw, and I've got this other saw.
Yeah.
And the chainsaw, the chain kept on falling off. And after I fixed it twice, it just laid there. And I was like, chainsaw, me too. Me too. I've got these crepe myrtles. I can't get the branches off. And I'm like, what am I going to do? So I tried to figure out something else, and I started, you know, coming up with a strategy of, trimming these, and I got all the trees done, both the trees, and had limbs piled up. And after I was done, they were piled up, and I sat on the grass, and I looked in the backyard, and I was like, oh my goodness, God. I said, the palm trees. I was like, I don't have to worry about the palm trees.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my goodness. I said, God. I said, I've been asking you for 2.5 years why you let those palm trees die.
Yeah.
I said, I don't have to worry about those palm trees anymore.
Wow.
And right there in my front yard, surrounded by all these crepe myrtle branches, I just started thanking God for dead palm trees. I said, God, thank you so much for letting those palm trees die.
Yeah.
I said, thank you for taking care of that for me. I said, 2.5 years earlier, I said, you took care of that for me.
Yeah.
And anyway, so
Wow.
I was just so, there's just been a lot of things throughout the way that I think that when you really go back and you look at your life and situations in those difficult times, you'll see the hand of God.
Yeah, because even
will.
in that story you shared, something that many people would be angry at God,
Right.
or, at least upset. My palm trees, those aren't cheap, right?
No, they were beautiful.
You were able to look back and
Yeah.
see that
Yeah.
even in that was a
that.
blessing in disguise.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. I was thanking God for dead palm trees.
Wow.
So I just sat there and cried in my front
That's a
yard.
good book title. Thanking God for dead palm
It could
trees.
be.
Yeah.
So,
And now you are, through your story, helping others. You're
Yes.
teaching a class now.
yes, healing hearts
Yeah.
for widows.
Yeah.
So that's been amazing. I wasn't expecting to do this. When we did our when we did the grief share last fall, in our class was about 10 people off and on, and 6 of us in there were widows, recent widows. 6 of us lost our husbands within that year. I didn't say I didn't lose. God, I'm sorry. my husband's not lost. I know where he's at, but him passed away. And so I wanted to kind of just get the women together, and just for us to get together in my home. But then I didn't want it to look like I was trying to start something in the church.
Yeah.
My own thing.
Right.
And so I went to Pastor Derek and I talked to him. I was like, hey, I said, God's kind of just put something on my heart, maybe just something for widows. And he's like, God's already talking to us. We already have like a logo. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so things kind of rolled from there.
That's awesome.
And so we have a class Tuesday nights. We're going to start our second semester this summer, June 4th, I believe. 6 p.m.
Yeah. When you were sitting in the car with your son, did the thought ever cross your mind that this is going to be a crazy testimony someday?
No, never. Not one time was I ever thinking that God was going to use me or this was going to be a testimony. I was just thinking, trying to stay focused on him and
even though you had already had that peace.
Oh yeah.
That God said he was with him.
Yeah. You still go through those emotions of loss.
Yeah.
You still go through those emotions of trauma. They had to call the ambulance because my body just shut down.
Yeah.
So you still go through those, even with faith like that, even with the knowledge of that, you still process that, but it's redirecting yourself when you come back to, and it's constantly redirecting yourself. And there are days that you're just, sometimes multiple times a day. No, God, I'm focused on you. No, God, I know I'm not alone. Because in those times of hurt, that's a vulnerable time for you. And the enemy, he's right there ready to strike, right?
Yeah.
He looks for the weak spots.
Yeah.
He roams to and fro seeking whom he may devour. So, like in the wild, the predator doesn't go after the strongest of the herd. He's going to go after the weak one.
Yeah.
And I knew I was broken. I knew I was weak. And I knew that I was vulnerable. And so just constantly knowing that I had to constantly redirect my mind to be, no, you're not alone. You might feel lonely right now, but you're not alone. You're sad right now, but you're not depressed. You're paused right now, but you're still going to move forward. And just constantly it was a constant battle to redirect my thoughts. I will say that.
Yeah. But that's where the battle was.
Oh, yeah.
Was in your thoughts.
Absolutely.
In your mind. That's
Absolutely.
where it all started.
And I think that's why it was so important for me to begin my day with reading the word.
Yeah.
And journaling and being able to go back too. And I still go back through my journals in this last year and a half, go back and reading where I was.
Yeah.
And now where I am, because sometimes it's hard to remember and where you were, once you kind of, progress. Right. And just going back, it's like, wow, God, you were there with me the whole time.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Tina, when you think of the future, what gives you hope?
God's word to me, honestly. Yeah. God's word to me when I go back and read it and his goodness to me and how he just speaks to my heart and says, you know what? I still have a purpose for you. I still have plans for you. And, that's what gives me hope is him, honestly. And just believing his word and believing him and not doubting that whatsoever.
Yeah. For people who might be going through something similar, what hope can you give them?
Yeah, that you're not alone. People, the pain doesn't last forever. You feel like it does. You feel numb. You don't want to be alone, yet you don't want to talk to anybody at the same time. I want to encourage those that are going through something. Don't stop coming to church. You come to church, be in corporate worship. The Sunday after Barry passed, I told my family, I was like, well, I'm going to church. And they said, well, Mom, you might want to stay home. My kids are like, Mom, you might want to stay home. I'm like, no, I'm going to church. They said, well, it's going to be difficult, Mom. You know that, going there without Dad. I'm like, it's difficult now. I said, I'd much rather be difficult in the presence of God. They said, well, you're going to cry. I'm like, well, I'm crying now. Yeah. I said, I might as well cry in the presence of God. And sure enough, I'm sure I sit in the middle, like the front middle. And I'm sure Justin's like, who is that lady down there crying the whole time in worship? Because I said they're worshiping and just crying. And after a few weeks, some people around me started coming up and they said, we know you've been struggling and going through a lot. We just want you to know that we're praying for you. And just people just being, because, when you go to church, well, when I come here, I all the same people. We kind of
Yeah.
all sit together.
You got your little area.
You don't necessarily maybe talk to them and know their names all
Yeah.
the time, but you're familiar faces, you know?
Yeah.
And so they said, we see you, and we want to know that we're praying for you. And so the people here at the church have just been so good. And so I just want to encourage you, don't stop coming to church.
Yeah.
You know, when you're going through tough times, that's the time that you really need to dig into God. You know, that's not the time that you turn away. That's not the time that you isolate yourself. That's not the time that you pull away from the Lord. You know, that's the time when you need him the most.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, I'm not special. You know, Matt, he doesn't love me more than he loves anybody else. And I know that he'll do what he's done for me for anyone else. As long as you search for him, you know, and present yourself to him, he will.
Yeah. Wow. Man, Tina, they weren't lying. You had an incredible story and still have one being written.
Yeah.
That is amazing. So thank you very much for sharing it with us, for sharing it with our listeners. I know it's helped me already, and I can only imagine the amount of people that are going to hear this and it's going to help them. So thank you very much, Tina. And thank you guys very much for joining this episode of Friends You Can Grow With.